Hello, and welcome to the Physical Therapy Owners Club podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Shields. And today I've got a longtime mentor and coach, business coach of mine and Will Humphreys that I've known for a number of years. Both Will and I used Scott Fritz. Well, we met Scott Fritz through Entrepreneurs Organization, one of the networking things that we did to meet together with other small business owners. And Scott was a moderator of Entrepreneurs Organization. And he also did some one-on-one coaching and consulting with us over the years and was influential in our growth and expansion with our physical therapy clinic. So Scott, number one, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Nathan. It's great to be here.
Yeah. Well, tell us, the audience, a little bit about your history, where you're coming from. You're not necessarily you're not from the physical therapy space at all, right, but now are working in the physical therapy space. But tell us a little bit about where you're coming from, what you're doing now.
Sure. Well, like you said, met you and Will back when I was facilitating Accelerator, which were startup companies under $1 million in EO. And you guys went on to not only join EO and have a great exit, but done great things since then. I had my own company that I sold in 2007. And so it kind of bridged that time when I had my company, sold it, and stayed involved in Accelerator. Authored a book in 2010 called The 40-Hour Work Year, which kind of chronicles how I grew my company without really working in it or on it at all the last 4 years. And then once that book came out, it kind of took off. I've been coached with coaching clients. Started a company called Growth Connect, which coaches and facilitates strategy sessions and educational sessions for companies, basically in the U.S. and Canada. And then earlier last year, Will actually called me up. Hadn't talked to him in a while because you guys had sold, or he sold his practices there. And he said, "Hey, I'd like to come up with a plan to do roll-ups for other physical therapy companies because they're kind of lost out there in the wilderness, having a tough time put these together and get those multiples up, right? That's how you really make that nice exit." So I've been working with Will. Our company's called Multiple Exit. We've been working since last February on this. And we're now, I think we have 22 clinics under our wing. We're going to take that up to 40. And we're coaching them and looking to help them have a great exit, a year and a half, 2 years down the road.
Yeah. And just to summarize for those listeners, what exactly you're doing, we had the opportunity to sell our clinics in partnership, if you will, a loosely held partnership, an agreement with other PT clinics. And by doing so, by placing the entire group on the market, we were able to get more for the sale of our clinics than we could if we sold them individually, right? And
correct.
That's what you're talking about. For those who don't know what roll-up and multiples are, that was, in essence, was our roll-up, put things together, put ourselves on the market, and by doing so, increase the multiple that we could get on our EBITDA. And if you want to look up EBITDA, I think it's EBITDA. Isn't that right?
Correct. Yeah. Earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. Basically net income.
Yeah, basically net income. And most purchasers will use a multiple of that net income to buy your practices. And the larger that net income, especially in a group setting, the greater the purchase price. And so you can get more. And essentially, that's what you and Will are doing at this time, is coaching companies to not only improve their businesses, right?
Correct.
Improve their businesses, improve their net profit, but also make them very valuable and wanted by the purchasers that are out there.
Correct. Yep. That's like I said, we launched that. We really fully launched it around August of last year, but we've been working on it since February. So we're about 6-7 months in and, going well, looking to add a few more. And it's part of when we met in Dallas at that conference. I think that's conversation we had, and here I am on your podcast. So
that's right. And so tell us a little bit about what we're going to get into this today. The people that are really going to connect with, or maybe want to look into what you're offering between you and Will, who are those particular candidates? Who's the prime candidate there?
Yeah. So what we have seen basically, Nathan, is that people who are pretty much technicians in their clinic, they still are probably treating patients, but not as much as they used to. They're not necessarily great business owners. They might be good business owners, but they don't really have the tools or the team or the resources to scale their business to get large enough to get their own exit. So that's kind of where we step in. We're kind of a mezzanine or a middleman for the PT clinics they're big enough to be profitable and have a nice business. And they're not so small that it's just a mom and pop, but they're not at the point, or really quite honestly want to take those steps to grow to a size that would get them a nice multiple. That's who we're looking at.
Yeah,
I would say, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, but stage
Right.
versus age, if you will. So it's not so much about the age of the owners; it's more about the stage of the business.
Right. And you're also, correct me if I'm wrong, but those owners who are maybe looking to sell in the next 2 to 5 years would really be prime.
Absolutely right. So timing, again, stage versus age. Timing is everything. So if you're interested in the next 5 years, if that's in your strategic plan, hopefully you have one that you've looked at, your vision statement of where you want to go to truly exit your practice in the next 2 to 5 years. That's our target market from that standpoint.
Gotcha. And so a lot of owners, I can promise you, well, you know this because you work with many small business owners, they haven't made that vision statement. They haven't gone that far down the line, right? To see exactly what an ending looks like, what a sale looks like, how to prepare, what that looks like, and what to do afterwards. And that's why I'm really excited to have you today, is because you're going to walk us through some of those steps.
Yeah, absolutely. You ready for me?
Yeah, I'll turn the control over to you because I know you're going to have a presentation for those who are watching on YouTube or via video, but we'll continue on with the audio portion for the podcast listeners.
All right, great. So I basically call this in our pre-call, Nathan. We kind of went over what your listeners and viewers like to talk about, and this is near and dear to my heart because this is probably about 60% of what I do on a weekly basis is work on helping people prepare and or exit their business. So I call this 3 steps to LTD, and LTD is what, Nathan?
Living the dream.
Living the dream, right? So most entrepreneurs, just like you and Will, when I met you guys, and most entrepreneurs, that's kind of their living the dream, right? They've exited their business. They probably have enough now in the bank that they're financially independent. They might still have to work a little bit, but they're not worrying about how they're going to pay their bills and how they're going to, cover their mortgage and pay for their kids' college. So that's kind of the living the dream, getting to that financial independence. And so I broke it into some, real basic steps. You know me, I like to keep things real simple. So right. Number 1 is you need to decide if you're ready to sell, right? And that kind of comes into 2 areas. And I'm a binary guy, so I'm a yes or no person. You're not kind of, half pregnant. I mean, are you going to sell or are you not going to sell? And again, that's where I go to stage versus age. I mean, you have to really have decided this at some point. And then, of course, the next step is really the type of sale you want. And I'm going to cover that. Mm-hmm. Secondly is then, okay, I've decided to sell. I'm yes on one. I've decided the type of sale I want. Now I need to prepare to sell. So what's that preparation look like? Well, as we already talked about, Nathan, the really first thing is how am I going to maximize that multiple? Because if you're not going to maximize the multiple, quite honestly, I don't think you should enter a sale process. It doesn't really make sense. And then secondly, and really the heavy lifting of all of this is positioning the business for sale. All right. And then lastly, I'm going to talk a little bit about life after the sale. What's funny, and not funny, but you probably know this, and we talk to enough owners, is a lot of the reasons business owners never sell is they're like, well, if I sold the business, what would I do? Right. Totally. And so I would just share with them my own experience now. I mean, I sold now 14 years ago. There's plenty to do out there. And let me tell you, when you have the cash reserves in the bank and your money's working for you, you're not working for your money. I don't know. To me, it's kind of easier to figure out what you want to do.
That's right.
So let's begin with the end in mind. All right. And this is where I start with anybody. I'm sure you and Will and I had this conversation many years ago.
Right.
And the first question you want to ask yourself is, would you buy your own company? Right. So would you buy your own company? If you say yes to this, you need to take that next step, which is, of course, okay, what would I pay for it? Right. And I'm not being flippant about this. You need to have this written down in a journal or in your notes or typed up somewhere where you can reflect on this. And then the next question is, what's your number to exit? So we're already getting to that begin with the end in mind, right? So a typical client of mine, I'll talk to them and ask them, would you buy your own company? A lot of times they're kind of put off by that. And I said, well, just play along, right? Play along. What would you pay for it? And they say, I pay $5 million. I say, okay, great. $5 million. That's not a bad number. Well, what's your number to exit? And they say 10 million. And I go, okay, well, then we know what we need to work with, right? You would pay $5 million, which believe me, anybody's going to buy you is not going to pay what you would pay.
No,
they're going to pay lower.
Right. And
don't forget the IRS gets a piece of that as well.
That's right.
And then let's close that gap, right? And ultimately though, in reality, it's the terms. It's not the price, it's the terms, because I could offer a great number to any business, but my terms could be so onerous that by the end of the day, they only get 20% of what I actually offered them to begin with.
Right.
And that's where Will and I are also very complimentary and helpful to these PT owners, is getting those terms as strong and as in favor of the owner as possible.
Right.
And then lastly,
I'll just say, just to share my own experience, this is where and I shared this with a client the other day. We had 3 to 4 offers to buy our clinics prior to when we actually sold. 3 to 4 offers over the previous probably 6 to 10 years, right?
Yeah.
And it was the terms that were the deal breakers. The money was nice, and we were like, "Oh, that's cool that someone would pay us that much for the clinics." But most of the time, and I know a lot of PT owners out there that have gotten offers such that they're selling probably 70% of their business, mostly probably cash. Yep. And the other 30% is either left for them to be partners in this new ownership deal, and they end up becoming essentially clinic directors, office managers with 30% stake in the business. And that's not what we wanted to do. We didn't want to step down, and neither did we want to. And we had one of these also was have an earnout that could significantly, like you said, be onerous on us to hit certain metrics, hit certain targets, or else we didn't get that extra 20 or 30% that we wanted on the back end. So the terms are huge. And I know a lot of owners might be looking specifically at their number, but the terms make a big difference. And it wasn't until we were clear as to what we wanted with our terms that allowed us to know exactly what we wanted when we sold and when we got.
Absolutely. It's not, don't fall in love with the numbers, what I like to say, right? It's not the price, it's the term. So,
right.
And you mentioned those earnouts, performance guarantees, holdbacks. I mean, when you read the fine print of a lot of these documents, the $5 million turns into 1.3 pretty quick. And that's a whole different number, right? Mm-hmm. And it makes a life-changing difference.
Right.
And then lastly, this is something you really need to think about. Are you looking to transition, to your point, right? Stay on and work there for a while, or do you want to completely tap out? Because if you're really saying, I want to completely tap out, the number and the terms really, really, really have to align.
Right.
Because that's a whole different mindset. And that does now get into age more than stage a lot of times. And older owners, they're done. They're in their 60s or maybe early 70s. They're done. They're not going to go work anywhere else. They're not going to stay on and have an earnout. And that really comes into play when you're thinking about this. So again, you got this figured out. Great. You've made that first step. We're now moving towards the concept. Now we need to talk about what kind of sale do you want? And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these, Nathan, in detail, but obviously the first one is business sale. You basically, you sell the business, right? The value of the business is often much less than you expect. And the reason is simply that you're too close to the business and see all the positives and not all the negatives. And your buyer is going to attach a risk discount and multiple one-sided terms. And then, of course, you have to factor in the amount you pay yourself, right? I'm going to talk about that a little bit later on in life after. Mm-hmm. How are you going to recover that income that you've been living on if it's now not there anymore? I mean, you have the money you got from the sale, but there's no monthly income, right? Mm-hmm. And then lastly, I say the business may not have the same value once you leave if you are heavily in the business, which I'm going to talk about as well.
Mm-hmm.
So business sale, that's the simple way. When most people talk about selling their business, they go, oh, well, let's do a business sale.
Yeah.
Second type is a management buyout, can also be known as an ESOP or employee stock ownership program. Mm. So this can be a great option since the management knows the business and they're often motivated to make it succeed. They might actually think they can do better without you and are happy to see you exit. I always remind this one to my owners. A lot of times, if you have a strong team, if you just get out of their way, like I did, your business can be worth a lot more money.
Right.
But the main issue in an ESOP is the funding of the buyout can be complicated and tricky. It is very tricky to do an ESOP. And quite honestly, unless you have about 100 to 150 employees minimum, ESOP doesn't make that much sense.
Okay.
There just isn't enough. There isn't enough employee payroll to cover the ESOP buyout.
Got it. Okay. Good to know.
That's management buyout. Management buy-in. So again, this is where it's kind of a reverse of a buyout. It's rare, but in effect, it is a sale to a management team that's brought in from the outside. All right. So this management team are actually quasi-investors. And it's more of a purchase with the aim of an exit quickly. So they're actually coming in and buying in, but their goal then is to kind of do what Will and I are doing, get that business as pretty as they can in a year and a half to 2 years and sell it.
Got it.
So that's a management buy-in. And sometimes you may be involved in that you may stay on as part of that buy-in. They may just buy you out. Yep.
Right. Okay.
Fourth one is going public, right? This can also be a roll-up. It's more, it can be a roll-up style without going public. And that's why I put roll-up on here. Okay. They kind of act the same. So this option is difficult since the shares or the company value only go up if the business has lots of potential and not many people want to exit a business when there's lots of potential. So your business is killing it. You're rocking and rolling, 100% growth. That's really the time you should want to go public. But a lot of people pump the brakes because that's the time they want to keep growing the business. Mm-hmm. There are multiple regulatory hurdles and extra reporting, plus it can be very expensive. Going public, I mean, pretty much the rule of thumb's around 1.5 million to 2 million to go public.
Okay.
So for most privately held small businesses, going public doesn't really make sense just from a financial standpoint.
Right.
Yeah. And then the owner is usually locked in for a couple of years before he or she can sell their shares. Yep. It's kind of like an earnout, but it's even more onerous because you could be sitting there. I mean, heaven forbid you sold with stock and 2008 happened and you might have sold at, $40 a share and now it's $4 a share.
Right.
I mean, so much for that return on your investment.
Right.
Let's go in public. Fifth one is liquidation. So a lot of people don't think of this, but this is a way to sell your business, especially if you have inventory. You can liquidate a company if you want to exit the business. Liquidation is not just for insolvent businesses. That's true. This is a way you can just exit a company. Liquidation just means turning a company's business and its assets into cash. And from a standpoint of what is this called out in the world of buying and selling businesses, it's called a members voluntary liquidation. So if you hear somebody talk about an MVL, that's a members voluntary liquidation.
And again, is this where someone is just like, you know what, I'm retiring, I'm locking the door behind me, sell the equipment, sell the book of business, and is that what you're talking about here?
Correct. I mean, I actually knew he wasn't my client, but he had a large company that sold accessories for cell phones and iPads and all that kinds of stuff. So he had literally, I don't know the total number, was well over $10 million in inventory.
Oh my God.
And he basically liquidated the inventory along with the business, and that's how he got out of his business.
Okay.
So it was a members voluntary liquidation. Again, this doesn't apply much to a PT world, but I'm just showing everybody the different types of exits that you can have.
Got it. Okay.
And then lastly, and honestly, this is how we started our conversation. We sold our business, is what's called a recap, or a private equity recapitalization. So a recap is where business owners can sell a portion of their business to a private equity, a PE firm, and this gives the owner a cash reward and still gives them the benefit of forecasted growth. Or if you're in a low economy, a turnaround in the economy, you can kind of ride the wave back up in the economy.
Right.
So PE firms, and this is what's different than a venture capital deal. PE firms not only provide capital, they can add value as a business partner. This additional benefit can come in the form of industry, operational, and organizational expertise, and this is all used to increase the value of your business. Mm-hmm. So when we were first approached by our CPA, he said, "Hey, we've got some PE firms that are interested in your space. Would you guys be interested in doing a recap, take some chips off the table, take some money off the table, and then ride the wave of growing the business because they're going to put money behind it, and then maybe at some point go through a roll up or go public down the road."
Right.
A lot of times a full exit can start in the form of a recap.
Right.
So that kind of gets us through the deciding. So you decided you're good to go. You decided the way you're going to sell your business. Now you need to prepare. You got to prepare. Right. And I like to start everybody with the ownership paradox. Nathan, I know you've seen this. It's a simple exercise. And when you've decided I want to sell, I take everybody through this exercise first. So any questions? I know I'm going through a lot of stuff. Anything you want to add or questions before I move on?
No questions at this time, no.
Okay. So now you're going to prepare to sell. Execute yourself against the ownership paradox. It's real simple. It's two arrows that intersect, forming an X. Okay. And I know for people listening, it's going to be hard visually, but they can still do the exercise. And I'm sure they can get these slides from me if they want them at a later date. I'm happy to provide these. So
sure.
Upper end of the left arrow going down is owner in the business 100%. And the upper end of the right arrow going up is company value maximized. Okay. Mm-hmm. Bottom end of the up arrow is company value. It could be negative, or it's definitely as low as possible. And bottom end of the down arrow is owner in the business 0%. And I want to be clear here, Nathan, this is in the business, not on the business. So if you're a PT owner and you're still treating patients and you're doing administrative work, and quite honestly, if you didn't go to the office for a month, the thing would fall through the earth. You're in the business, right? Your
arrow trajectory is downward and to the
correct.
Right.
Correct.
Right.
So when I first saw this exercise, I circled on the down arrow. I was in the business about 75%. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so I saw this at a conference, and the guy said, "All right, so now that you've circled your down arrow, draw an intersecting line and draw another circle. And that is the quickest, most accurate valuation of your company you will ever see."
Got it.
I went back and showed this to my team, and I said, "Hey, we got problems, right? I want to be on the right side of that arrow. I want to get my company value up. Well, I'm going to start working with you, my team, to get me out of being in the business as much as possible." And then, the rest of my story, I wasn't in or on the business for 4 years, and we got a maximum price for our sale because Karen and I had not been in or on the business for 4 years.
What was your, just to interrupt, I'm sorry, what was the management team's response when you showed them this? When you said, "Listen, I'm in the business too much and I need to get out of it." What was their response?
Yeah, well, this is how I say to people, Nathan, is, I'm not saying any of this is easy. I'm just saying you can do it.
Right.
At the time of our exec team of 5, we had 2 or 3 people who they loved this, right? This was right up their alley. This is what they've been complaining about all along. You and Karen are too much in the business. Stop doing seagull management, flying over and pooping on everybody. Just get out of our way, right?
Yeah.
Let us run the business.
Yeah.
Conversely, we had 2 or 3 other people. And again, I don't remember. It was 2 or 3 who really, they were more just, doers. Like they didn't really want to be an intrapreneur and grow the company and find ways to be creative and scale things. So, and they, quite honestly, they weren't with us 2 years later on the executive team. They were still in the company, but they weren't on the executive team any longer. So
interesting.
Yeah. And that's part of the battle, right? Or part of the challenge is finding those good A players who really believe in and are aligned with your mission, vision, and values of your company.
And I think that's owners just need to be aware of that they're not going to satisfy everybody as they're going through this process. If they want to maximize the value of their company, not everyone's going to be on board, and maybe you need to expect that going into it, and then start looking for those who are aligned and find places for them to grow and progress so that you can maximize the value of the business.
Correct. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, again, thinking back, I remember the first strategy session I did with Will. I don't believe you were there at that time. You might have been, but there was 10 or 11 people in the room because Will wasn't really sure who all should be on that executive team. And by the last one we did, which was 5-6 years later, there was like that core of 6 people who really got it. They were really laser focused. They were aligned with the culture. They knew where Will and you were taking the company.
Right.
And that's, so being patient is key, is part of this. And that's tough for owners. They want everything done like yesterday. But you got to kind of be patient. And to your point, you got to get the right people in the right seats, as the saying goes, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So let me show you real quick. And this is the power of the ownership paradox. I call it paradox monetized, which is known as the add back feature. And this, again, is something we're working with these PT owners, Will and I, very heavily on. In fact, it came up on our call yesterday. So let's assume the following. I might take you through a quick scenario. Let's assume you have an offer to buy your company for 5 times EBITDA, which is what we already talked about, which is basically net income.
Right.
And your EBITDA is $2 million. All right.
Okay.
So basically it could be a 10 million sale, right? Everything else equal.
Mm-hmm.
Annual salary plus benefits is $500K. So your total compensation, distributions, pay, everything is $500K. Got that?
Yep.
You work in the business full time. Okay. So you're on that arrow I just showed you. You're in the business full time. Now you've got a good business, obviously. You're making decent money, obviously, but your EBITDA is low or lower than it should be because you're in the business full time. All right.
Okay.
So here's the reality. The buyer will probably allow $100K at most of that compensation to be added back due to the fact that they will need to hire 1 or more people to replace you.
Right.
Or in the earnout scenario, you still need to stay on and work. So they still got to keep paying you some sort of a salary. Right.
But it's not going to be $500,000.
No, it's not going to be $500,000, and they're not going to give you that $500,000 add back because they got to replace you. Okay. Or add a couple people.
Yeah. What's the market value to replace you? And it's not 500,000.
Correct.
Right.
So what should be 2.5 million, because they would add that 500K back to your 2 million. Okay. If you were not in the business at all. So when Karen and I sold, all the compensation we got annually got added back to our net income line. Okay. So in this scenario, the 2 million becomes 2.5, but they're only going to allow 100. So now your 2.1 is your adjusted, what's called an adjusted EBITDA, or your add back EBITDA.
Right.
So 400 grand difference. So let's do a little math here. You're going to get a 12.5, instead of getting a 12.5 million buyout, you're going to get a 10.5 million buyout. $2 million left on the table because you were too much in the business, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And as I like to remind people, you can make more money, you can't make more time. All that time you spent in the business is gone. You're never getting that back.
Right.
So not technically, the reality is if you don't execute when you're positioning your business for sale and get yourself out of the business, which is what we're working with our members on, Will and I, you are leaving a lot of money on the table. I mean, $2 million isn't just pocket change. I mean, that probably pays your tax bill.
That's true.
Right?
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. No, you're exactly
so that's the monetization of the ownership paradox. So instead of just saying, oh, it's a cute little diagram, what does it mean? Well, this is what I'm trying to get through to people now, because I kept missing the boat on this one early on, is you guys are leaving a lot of money on the table. Get out of your business. Get out of the way.
And that's really hard for physical therapists to do. And I'm sure you recognize this in other industries, and let me know your experience. But in the physical therapy realm, as I'm working with clients and I'm telling them, listen, if you want to achieve these goals and grow your business, you have to get out of treating full time. And that is a very difficult transition to go from technician to administrator, because that's what that's what we've spent the last 25 years, 30 years of our life in our professions doing, was to build up to be a licensed physical therapist. And now you're telling me discard that identity and take on a new one. And honestly, I don't know what to do in that administrative space. And that's what I'm sure that's what you and Will are doing. That's what I'm doing with my one-on-one coaching clients, is to show them this is how you manage, this is how you lead, and this is now what you do with your time that you're not treating with patients. And what I love about this is that you're showing them there's monetary value to doing this, right? Your business is not only going to grow and you'll gain more fulfillment by serving more people, monetarily, you will be rewarded.
Absolutely. It's spot on. And, Will and I tell people, once you've decided you want to join our group and be part of it. So again, we've answered that. Am I ready to sell? Here's the vehicle we're going to use. You need to be all in, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what this is about. This is about being all in. Because if you're not all in, don't even bother deciding to sell. Just keep doing what you're doing until you decide you want to be all in.
Yeah. Improve your business. Keep going, be happy, achieve your goals, both personally, professionally, financially. But this is for those people who are really focused on the next 2 to 5 years.
Making an exit, which, and you know me well enough. I think everybody should always be thinking of their exit, whether it happens next year or 10 years, you should be, your exit will find you if you don't find your exit, is the way to look at it, right? I mean,
you're going to exit sometime.
Correct.
It's best to be prepared.
Correct. Exactly. So one more thing I wanted to talk about here before we move on to life after. So you've decided you're selling, you've figured out your ownership paradox, you've figured out your ad back, you're getting yourself out of your business. And again, now let's talk about 15 quick points. And these are just points. By the way, I meant to mention, for those of you who see the screen, I've got my book logo up there in the corner. If you buy the 40-hour work year, or you go online and get the Audible, all of this is on there in detail. This is straight from the book because it's my story of how I did what I did. Mm-hmm. So let's just talk about this position thing right now. And if you did nothing else from listening today and you decide I want to sell, you can start actually executing against these points. Your practice is going to be running way better 6 to 12 months from now than if you did nothing. First and overall, the CEO is overseeing the entire company and the CEO is not the founder. I'm not hung up on titles, but the point is you have somebody else overseeing your company. It's not you. You're less of the focal point of the business. Executive team of entrepreneurs accountable for every aspect of the performance. So again, that's the concept where you've got your executive team. They're running the business. You're there more as the visionary and kind of a coach. You're not there to run the business.
Right.
Strategic planning, exit planning session every year with mid-year pulse. This is what I did with you guys, right? Having that annual planning session, which I think strategic planning is exit planning. That's what you're doing.
Right.
Top 5 priorities for the company over 1, 2, and 3 years. Again, getting yourself ready to show the buyers where you see your company going over the next 1, 2, and 3 years. Mm-hmm. Owners are passive investors and visionary in their leadership. You've taken on the role of passive investor and founder. You're not CEO or president any longer.
What would your definition of passive investor be? What qualifies as a passive investor?
So passive investor, great question. And you probably remember this from our days working together, is where you have no direct reports, right? You may get on a monthly call to go over financials or key metrics, but there's nobody reporting to you directly other than the CEO or president of the company. Yeah. And that's only on a reporting basis. They're not on a monthly reporting basis. They're not reporting to you like daily. Hey, how did I do today? You're not overseeing their work efforts. They're strictly reporting to you just as a board of directors. So almost think of yourself as a board of advisors member or board of directors member.
Right. Okay. Gotcha.
Yep. Reduced year-over-year costs while increasing sales. I mean, a buyer wants to see that as a percentage. They want to see that you kept your costs under control as you've grown the business. You just haven't gotten fat and happy and spent all the money you've brought in on the top line.
Right.
Systems dependent operations. Can't talk about this enough. Hire people to run the systems. Don't hire people to run the business. I mean, that's even though it's like halfway down the list, it might be number 1 from a standpoint of positioning your company.
Does that particular action item come up really frequently in your annual planning sessions to become more systems dependent?
Oh, yeah. For people who have not done this, have not systematized, put their standard operating procedures in place, it's always in the top 5 until it gets done.
That's what I'm seeing as I'm working with my clients, like in doing these annual planning meetings, creating and systematizing their policy and procedures manual comes up like number 1 or number 2 almost every time.
Well, and a great tip, and I'm sure you've talked about it. He used to be in the accelerator group in Arizona. Chris Ronzio, he owns Trainual. trainual.com. That's a web-based platform for all your systems and training for your company. In fact, everybody that's in our member group, they're all going on to Trainual to systematize all their clinics. And whether it's Trainual or somebody else, you need to get that stuff out of your brain, right? Get it documented. Put it into your documented procedures and processes. So when you hire somebody, you can show them what they need to be trained on.
Right. And buyers want to see that. They want.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, and again, in our case, Karen and I had nothing really to do with the business for 4 years. So it was evident that we didn't just say we had systems. We had systems. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been as profitable as we were without the owners being involved.
Right.
Great reputation in the industry. That kind of goes without saying, right? Good luck selling if you're known as kind of the black sheep of the market. That's not going to work so well. No company debt. Again, you can sell with debt, but when you have a company that's running without debt, it makes the positioning for exit so much easier. There's no funky, warrants or reps or guarantees or got to buy out Uncle, Sal who put money in 20 years ago and you forgot to pay him off. There's just none of that, right?
If you have $100,000 in debt, does that go against your EBITDA? And thus,
what they would do is again, in most cases, not always, but in most cases, they would back that out of the sale price.
Oh, okay.
So if you were to get $1 million for your business and you had 100,000 in debt, they'd pay off the debt on the bank note, let's say, and then pay you the 900,000.
So they're not going to multiply that debt like they multiplied the net income.
No. It would just be subtracted. Okay. Yeah, because it's a balance sheet item, not a net income.
Yeah, just making sure.
Yep. At or above industry standards in all margin areas. Again, this is one of the things we're really working with our members on, getting those margins up.
Right.
Year-over-year client retention, top 10% of industry. You want to really keep those clients, the ones that are the ongoing clients. Year-over-year growth in top 10% of the industry. Nationwide footprint. So again, this is where what Will and I are doing comes in handy, right? We're able to say, look, okay, you may really be great in your market of X city and Y state, but imagine the power you have when you have 40 other clinics joining you in 8 other states and 12 other cities. Right. I mean, that just gives you that power, that economies of scale that buyers are looking for.
I think that was really exciting about our purchase when the purchasers bought us, is because we had a large footprint in metropolitan Phoenix and some clinics that outside of the South, outside of Arizona, in Southern California, and even some in Louisiana. And so that footprint, especially specific to geographic Phoenix, was a big deal.
Yeah, and I put nationwide in the book because that's what we had done. We were in 42 states, so we obviously were pretty much nationwide. But when it gets to things like what you were doing, this could be, like, to your point, a geographic concentration, same kind of a thing, right? That's what buyers are looking for. They don't want, and typically they're not going to want, say, 20 clinics spread over 20 states, right? No. They want maybe 4 states with 5 clinics each, or in your case, 3 states with 8. So get some concentration. That really helps get your sale price.
Definitely.
Yep. No outstanding litigation. Again, here's the problem. If you have outstanding lawsuits and you go to sell, they're going to do what's called a holdback. The buyer's going to do what's called a holdback, and it's typically 3 times the estimated settlement amount. So, and by the way, now they've bought you. They've got 3 times the settlement amount out of you. How likely do you think they're going to fight this litigation and get you the most money you can get? They're not. Right. So in my case, Karen and I, my business partner, we had to pay off 2 pending lawsuits. We just got them off the books because it wasn't worth going to sale with those on the books.
Understood.
And then lastly, and again, this isn't tough in the PT world, but in some businesses, it's very difficult, especially like SaaS businesses. No single client, 5% over total sales or margin. So making sure you have a very diversified client base. I've had clients who had 50, 60% of their business coming from one client. And I mean, I call that the golden goose sitting on the stack of dynamite, right? I mean, you're just waiting for that to go off. And when it does, game over. The
companies that were looking into our clinics, they wanted to see our payer mix. They wanted to make sure that we didn't have 60% Medicare and 70% of our referrals from a single physician. They wanted to see the payer mix and the referral mix, and to make sure that we weren't isolated into certain insurances and doctors.
Absolutely. That's a great point. In your industry, that's what it is. And it's been interesting working with all these other PTs and owners out there, that a lot of them are really in their top 5. They want to make a priority shifting to more of a cash pay percentage of their business. So
really?
Yeah, they're coming up with services and offerings that are cash pay only, which, cash is king for a reason, right? So it's It's exactly what you just said. In my case, it was client percentage. In your case, it would be certain percentage and certain buckets of payables.
Well, you could look at it that way too. That like if 100% of your business is insurance based, that's typical for the profession. But if you could diversify and show that, yeah, we only have 75 or 60% of our business is insurance based, and this other 40% is cash based, that could be huge.
Oh yeah, for a buyer especially, right? Because they're not worried that something goes sideways in the insurance world. Which, as far as I know, Nathan, the insurance carriers aren't paying out more, right?
No, they're not inclined to do that. No.
All right. I know you want to keep this on a time limit here, so I'm going to go right into life after, right? And this is pretty straightforward. Honestly, it's just like begin with the end in mind. You need to be thinking about this all the way through. Don't just wait till the day it closed and the money got wired to your account and you never even had this conversation with yourself or your family or your spouse. You just said, "Hey, I sold. Now what?" Right?
Right.
So I was just doing a talk the other day in Florida, and this guy came up to me and said, "Yeah." He goes, "I sold my first business and I thought I was going to fish the rest of my life." He goes, "I love fishing, but I don't love fishing 365 days a year." Right. So you got to know what you're going to go to. So I say, again, and I've said this already, stage versus age. The life after has a lot to do with stage versus age, meaning, are you totally tapping out and you truly are just going to retire because you're at that age of your life? Or are you going to go into something else, stay involved, transition into something else?
Mm-hmm.
I like to say this. Secondly, plan to take a deep breath in several months to a year off, right? I think Will I'm not sure exactly. I think Will went to Europe for a year or 6 months or something.
Yeah, Will took his family to Europe for 6 months. This was a tough part for me because I hadn't figured this part out when we sold. And it was a good year or so before I really figured out what I wanted to do next. And I'm still kind of playing with things.
Well, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but you're doing something and you're moving forward, right?
Right.
And that's why I say this is 3 steps. You decide you want to sell, get your company ready to sell. And also this goes in congruence with it, thinking about your life after, right? Don't wait till the very end.
Right.
Define your life and what you will do in 1, 2, and 3 years after the sale. So you sit down and really think about this. So even if year 1 is do nothing, travel the world, go to Europe, whatever, what are you going to do in year 2 and 3 when you come back, right? And be specific about this. Be intentional. Don't just kind of wing it. Sit down and put a top 5 together for what you want to do with your life.
Mm-hmm.
Recognize and forecast your new reality and cash flow situation. I touched on this a little bit before. Hopefully, those of you listening have a net worth statement or a cash flow statement that you look at as a personal standard for your life or a budget for your life. You need to forecast what's this going to look like once that income is gone and you're living off what you got off the sale and or other residual investments. Okay, because it can be a shocker if some people are living high lifestyles and that cash flow is gone and you start to see, wow, my bank balance just keeps going down and nothing's replacing it. It can be, all hands on deck, especially. Let's not forget the economy is going to go up and down. Like things are going to happen. So don't expect it to be a constant rocket ride in the stock market.
Yeah, that money can go quick.
Absolutely. Communicate your plans to family members, right? Don't leave them in the dark, especially your spouse and people close to you. Hey, by the way, I sold my company. Long story I won't go into, but I actually went in on a deal and bought part of a company, majority with a partner of mine. The seller never told his wife.
Oh, wow.
2 days later, we got the phone call. I need to buy you guys back out or I'm going to have to get a divorce. So, keep your family members included in this conversation. It's not a secret. It's not a secret when you go in one morning and say, I'm not going to work today. And the wife says, why? And you go, I sold the company. That's probably not a good place to be.
Probably not a good place in the relationship.
Exactly. Get your finances in order and create a new forecasted net worth statement. I kind of hit on this already, but make sure that, this is all in place. You're not going into it blind. You can forecast this out based on what you're going to get paid. It's not going to be that difficult.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Nice. Thank you so much for sharing all that. I mean, you shared a ton of information, like even the different ways that you can exit your practice is much more than I've shared with the listeners in the past. It might have even gone over their heads, but I would highly recommend they look at the video again in your PowerPoint presentation. So especially if they're visual learners, to see how it all works out. But you hit on some really key points in that it's important to be intentional about this. Essentially, right. What do you want to get out of your business and when? What does it look like? Well, let's prepare so we can maximize that exit. But to what extent? Like, right. Why are we doing this? What is the purpose behind this? I had a client who sold last year. I was really worried about him because he was selling a singular practice, but as I asked him the different questions, well, what are you going to do and why is this a good time and how is this going to work out for you? I found myself saying, well, okay, well, yeah, maybe this is good for you. And I give him my thumbs up. Yeah. Not that that mattered. I mean, he was going to go through with it anyways, but what was initially a concern was not so much because he had thought through these things. He knew exactly why he was doing it. He had full faith and confidence what he was going to do next. And honestly, he knew if that didn't pan out, what he was going to do after that. So he had a plan B and plan C, right? And so it's easy to go into this situation, and it's much more comforting when they have thought that through. It's even more comforting, honestly, Scott. The cool thing about what you and Will bring to the table is that you bring so much experience to the table so that owners know that they're not going to get taken advantage of.
Right. We're not, and I mean, obviously you really know Will really well. I know both of you well, but you know Will really well, being business partner and all that. And it's not bragging, but I don't need to do this. I'm doing this because I get as you can probably tell, hopefully in the presentation, I'm very passionate about entrepreneurship. I'm passionate about helping business owners. And when Will told me the story of, quite honestly, how most PT owners don't get anywhere near the value for their company they should get, that's kind of what sold me to go into this with him. Mm-hmm. And it's fun to see the excitement and the positive attitude that comes out of these owners when they start to realize, wow, this isn't just, unicorns and rainbows. This actually will happen. Like, here's how we're going to do it. Here's the steps we're going to take. And 1.5 to 2 years from now, we have a successful exit.
Right. And at the very least, you have a very successful business. That's essentially an ATM, right? Because we want your goal is to get them to be passive investors, whether they sell or not, right?
Correct. And that is an approach we've taken with several of them, because I think most of them now, I think, are in the mindset. But in the beginning, they were like, well, maybe I just want to create an ATM. And we said, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But as I say in my book, if your business is running as if it could be sold for the maximum amount at any time, that's going to naturally kick off the most cash for you and make your life the best it can be. Right. So I lived the dream for many years before I sold my company. So living the dream, to your point, it can just be an ATM. That's still living the dream if that's what you want. Right.
Exactly. And it just so many possibilities at that point. It just opens up a whole new avenue. A lot of opportunities are then afforded to you when you get to that point. But it takes some of this guidance. It takes some leadership. It takes some of the grind and the sweat equity to get to that point, right? It's not like you said before, as you were trying to transition from that 75% in the business to 0% in the business. That's a grind. It takes some work.
Oh yeah. No, it took us almost 18 months to totally transition out of the business, which is why I tell people, depending on where you're at, 12 to 24 months to transition yourself out of the business to whatever degree that means. The other thing I will say real quick too, because we have some members who've talked about this, it's not only doing this not only positions you to sell your company, it also positions you to buy other companies. So if you let's say you've gone out and raised some money, or you have some investors that want to have you be the lead purchaser, you could actually then go out and purchase and acquire and merge these other companies into your operation. Right.
That's cool. Yep. Interesting. I love that concept. Well, if people wanted to get in touch with you and what you're doing, either you personally or learn more about Multiple Exit, how do they do that?
Yeah. So my email is scott@growthconnect.com, scott@growthconnect.com, or you can just go to growthconnect.com. And of course, you can find me there. You can see all the different services and projects I'm involved in. And if you're interested in the book, you can buy it on Amazon, Audible. It's 40-hour work year, or you can go to 40hourworkyear.com. Either way. All right. Look me up. You always talk to Nathan. I'll send Nathan the PowerPoint. So if anybody pings you for that, I've done enough podcasts that happens. So I'll send it to you, and feel free to send it out for anybody that wants it.
Will do. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, man. Thank you.